Welcome to Darkleaveswhisper, the spirit string. Tonight, we're venturing into a forest where nothing is quite what it seems. Follow a city girl, her boyfriend, and his friends on a camping trip that takes a dark, unsettling turn. Listen closely. The forest might be alive, and the whispers are always watching. If you enjoy chilling stories like this, remember to subscribe, comment, and share with someone brave enough to listen. I've never really been a nature person. The smell of wet earth, the rustle of leaves, the sharp tang of pine needles in the air, it all felt alien to me. But here I was, perched on the tailgate of Jason's old truck, trying to look casual while my blonde hair tangled itself in the wind. 20-something city girl, completely out of my element. His friends laughed behind me, tossing backpacks and cooler boxes like pros. I gripped my own bag a little too tightly, nails digging into the straps. "This is it," Jason said, bouncing on the balls of his feet, his grin wide and confident. "Best camping spot in the state. No cell service, no distractions, just us and the forest." I forced a laugh, trying to match his enthusiasm, but my stomach tightened. No distractions. Sounds peaceful, right? Except there was something in the way the forest loomed over the clearing, dense and dark, even in late afternoon light. Shadows pooled where the sun didn't reach. The trees swayed slightly, creaking, though the air was still. "Come on, let's set up before dark," one of his friends called. I followed, trying to convince myself it was all excitement and nerves, not fear. Tent poles poked my hands, and stakes dug into the soft soil awkwardly. Jason and his friends moved like they'd done this 100 times before. I fumbled with the tent flap, hair falling into my face, cheeks warming. Once the tents were up, we gathered around the fire pit. The first sparks caught and hissed, and I realized I was holding my breath. The forest around us was silent, unnervingly so. No birds chirping, no wind in the trees, just stillness. "Relax, it's just nature," Jason said, noticing my wide-eyed stare. He leaned close and pressed a hand to my back. "You'll love it. You just need to listen." I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I listened anyway, and then I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper. I froze. "Did you hear that?" I asked, eyes scanning the shadows beyond the firelight. Jason shrugged. "Hear what?" The whisper didn't repeat, not audibly, but the feeling remained, a subtle tug at the edges of my mind, like the forest itself was watching. I forced a laugh, blaming my imagination. As the night stretched, the fire crackled. Jason's friends swapped stories. Nothing scary, just campfire tales and teasing remarks. But every crack of a branch outside the circle of light made my heart leap. Every shadow seemed too deep, too deliberate. I felt eyes on me, though no one was there. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. "It's just the woods," I murmured under my breath, wrapping my arms around my knees. But even the words felt hollow. The trees stood like silent sentinels, dark and immovable, as if they had been waiting for something or someone. When it was time to crawl into the tent, I hesitated. Jason's hand found mine again, squeezing gently. "It's just a night in the woods," he said, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. He didn't see it, couldn't see what I felt. Inside the tent, everything was supposed to feel safe. Sleeping bags, mesh screens, the muffled sounds of laughter outside, but the forest didn't stop. Its presence seeped in. Every branch scraping against another sounded like fingers on a window. Every distant snap of wood sounded deliberate, purposeful. I rolled over, staring at the tent ceiling, trying to ignore it. But the whisper returned, clearer this time. A soft hiss, almost coaxing, curling around my mind. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted upright, heart hammering. my blonde hair stuck to my forehead with sweat. I whispered Jason's name, but the only response was the rustle of leaves outside. The forest was alive, I realized with a sickening certainty. Not just alive, aware. I told myself I was imagining it, that I'd been cooped up in the city too long, that my mind was playing tricks. But the feeling didn't fade. The trees seemed closer now, their shadows reaching, stretching toward the tent, and somewhere in the distance a branch snapped sharply, like a warning. I curled up, clutching the sleeping bag, willing myself to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was waiting, watching, patient, and that I was not alone. Outside, the wind picked up, or maybe it didn't. My eyes stayed fixed on the tent flap, listening for the whispers among the pines, and I knew the night was just beginning. The next morning, the forest looked less intimidating in daylight. Sunlight filtered through the tall pines, painting golden streaks across the forest floor. Dew clung to the blades of grass, sparkling like tiny jewels. I almost convinced myself the night had been a trick of my imagination. Jason and his friends were already laughing, joking, and gathering firewood. I followed, still feeling awkward in my city sneakers, ears straining for any hint of those whispers from last night. "Come on, don't be such a wimp," Jason said, tossing a bundle of sticks to one of his friends. He grinned at me, his blonde hair catching the sunlight. "It's just a few trees, not a haunted mansion." I laughed nervously, letting him take my hand, but even as I stepped into the woods, I felt it. The forest was watching. The trees were too still in the light, the shadows too long and sharp. We followed a narrow trail, the dirt path winding through dense pines and fallen branches. Every step crunched loudly underfoot, the sound echoing strangely as if the forest itself was amplifying it. Jason led the way, talking animatedly about past camping trips, while I hung back slightly, scanning the trees. At first, everything seemed normal. Birds chirped, squirrels darted between trunks, the scent of pine and moss filled the air. But then it started. The whispers. They were faint, like the wind brushing against leaves, or someone speaking far, far away. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I noticed the others. Jason's friends slowed, glancing around, smiles fading just a little. "Did anyone else hear that?" I asked. My voice sounded small, almost ridiculous. "Hear what?" Jason said, frowning. But his tone was sharper, a little tense. I pointed toward the trees, but of course there was nothing to see. Only shadows stretching between trunks, twisted by sunlight. The whispers seemed to curl around me, brushing my hair, tugging at my neck, almost imperceptible, but impossible to ignore. We pressed on. The trail forked, and Jason insisted we take a path that cut deeper into the forest. "Trust me, it's worth it," he said. I nodded, trying to ignore the growing knot of unease in my stomach. Somewhere behind me, a twig snapped sharply. I spun, heart racing, but no one was there. I forced myself to laugh. "Probably just a deer," I said, but the sound didn't comfort me. The forest seemed too quiet for wildlife, too deliberate. As we went deeper, the light shifted. Sunbeams became narrow shafts that barely touched the forest floor. Shadows pulled in corners, dark and heavy. The whispers grew more distinct, forming shapes in my mind. Soft syllables, almost words, almost names. Jason's friend Mark veered off to inspect a fallen tree. "Hey, look at this," he called. I followed, curiosity warring with my unease. But the moment I stepped toward him, I felt a pressure on my chest, subtle but insistent, like the forest itself was urging me to stop. I froze, and the whispering intensified. Don't go. Don't go. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it. When I looked back, Mark and the others were gone. Just like that, swallowed by the trees. Panic bubbled in my chest. Mark, I called. My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the dense woods. Jason appeared beside me, and I grabbed his arm, relief mixing with fear. Where'd everyone go? I asked. He glanced down the trail, frowning. I don't know. Maybe they're just messing with us. But I knew it wasn't a joke. Something was different. The shadows had shifted while we weren't looking. The whispers, they were closer now, brushing against my ears, circling in ways that didn't make sense. We moved forward, hugging the trail, trying to stay close together. Every few steps, I caught glimpses of movement just beyond the tree line. Shadows that didn't match the trees, fleeting shapes that twisted unnaturally before disappearing. I blinked, and they were gone, leaving me doubting my own eyes. By late afternoon, the group stopped at a small clearing with a trickling stream. I crouched to dip my hands in the water, trying to steady my racing thoughts. But even there, the whispers followed, soft, insistent, barely audible. You shouldn't be here. Not yet. Jason noticed my gaze darting around. Relax, he said, but his voice wavered slightly. He tried to smile, but I could tell he felt it too. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched across the forest floor, dark and unnatural. The trail back to camp seemed longer than it should have, as if the forest itself had rearranged. I felt the tension rising in my chest, a cold knot of dread that I couldn't shake. And then I saw it, a tree, twisted and bent in the shape of a figure, almost humanoid, standing silently just beyond the clearing. I blinked. The figure shifted, and in the pause between heartbeats, I swore it moved closer. The whispers turned almost urgent. You can't stay. You can't stay. I shivered, and the group huddled closer. The forest felt alive, aware, and somehow waiting. Night was coming, and with it, whatever had been following us, waiting, was going to reveal itself. By the time we returned to the campsite, the forest had transformed. Shadows stretched across the clearing like dark fingers, twisting and pulling where the light didn't reach. The campfire we had left smoldering earlier now cracked and hissed, sending sparks curling into the night sky. I shivered, rubbing my arms, wishing I had brought more than a thin jacket. Jason and his friends were quieter now. The earlier laughter had faded, replaced by uneasy murmurs and glances toward the tree line. Even in the warm glow of the fire, the forest seemed too dark, too alive. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had walked straight into something waiting for us. I wrapped my legs around myself on a log, trying to calm my racing heart. The whispers were back, faint, almost drowned out by the crackle of flames, but unmistakable. You shouldn't be here. Did you hear that? I whispered, voice trembling. Jason leaned closer, his arm brushing mine. Hear what? He frowned, scanning the shadows. There was a tension in his jaw, a tightness I hadn't noticed before. I realized I wasn't the only one hearing something. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the firelight. We all froze. The sound repeated, closer this time, deliberate. My stomach knotted. Every instinct screamed that we weren't alone. Mark laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Probably just a deer. Or, the wind. But the wind didn't move the branches that snapped. And the deer, I wasn't so sure. Something about the movement was wrong. We tried to settle in for the night, telling stories to keep spirits high. ghost stories, silly pranks, playful scares. But as I spoke, even my own voice sounded hollow. Each story seemed to echo in the trees, absorbed and twisted before returning as a subtle pressure at the edges of my mind. I glanced around the circle. Jason's friends laughed, but their smiles were tight, eyes darting into the dark. I realized the firelight barely reached the edges of the clearing, leaving deep shadows that seemed to ripple. I could almost see shapes moving in the dark, too fast, too smooth to be human. At one point, I caught movement at the edge of my vision, a tall, thin figure slipping between the trees. I blinked and it was gone. My pulse quickened. Jason noticed my staring. "What is it? I thought I saw something," I stammered. My voice sounded small. "Probably a tree," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. We ate in silence, the whispers threading through the air, almost imperceptible, curling around us. I could feel them brushing my hair, brushing my neck. I imagined eyes on the back of my head, though when I turned, no one was there. As the night deepened, the air grew colder. Mist began to roll in, crawling along the forest floor. The flame of the fire seemed smaller, weaker against the darkness. Shadows pressed closer, and with every crack of a branch, my nerves screamed. Then I noticed the first disappearance. Mark's backpack. It had been leaning against a log, was gone. Jason swore he'd seen it just moments ago. We searched frantically, scanning the clearing, calling his name. Nothing. No sound. No sign. Only the whispers, faint and chilling. "You can't leave. You can't leave." Panic started to seep in. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but every shadow, every flicker of movement in the mist made me flinch. My blonde hair stuck to my forehead with sweat, even though the air had turned cold. I could feel something pressing at the edges of my mind, making it hard to think. Then I saw it, or maybe I imagined it. A shape, tall and thin, stepping silently through the mist, its form bent unnaturally, moving with a fluidity that made my stomach churn. Its eyes, I thought I saw them glint, but perhaps it was just the firelight. It paused at the tree line, then vanished. I turned to Jason, but he didn't see it. He only frowned at me, skepticism etched into his features. That's when I realized none of us might have been seeing the same thing. The forest was distorting reality, or my mind was fraying. I spent the rest of the night in a half-conscious panic. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shapes shifting at the edge of my vision. Every time I opened them, shadows seemed to lean closer. I heard whispers everywhere and nowhere, winding through the trees, curling around the fire, pressing inside my skull. Stay, stay, stay. By the time dawn's first light threatened the edges of the clearing, I was exhausted, trembling, and certain that something had been out there with us all night. Jason and his friends looked tired too, though none admitted to hearing the whisper or seeing the shapes I had. And as the sun rose, spilling pale light across the forest floor, I realized something terrifying. The forest hadn't stopped. It hadn't waited for night to end. The sense of being watched, of something just beyond the trees, waiting, had not left. It was still there. And I knew with a deep, gnawing certainty that the forest would not let us leave unscathed. The forest had changed by the time we decided to move deeper. Shadows weren't just shadows anymore. They twisted unnaturally, stretching toward us as if the trees themselves were leaning in to watch. Mist clung to the undergrowth, thickening with every step, curling around our ankle like cold fingers. Jason insisted we stay together, but I noticed the group had already begun to fragment. Mark had wandered off again, drawn by some unseen curiosity, while the others were scattered along the trail. I wanted to call him back, to demand that we stick together, but my voice felt small and useless against the oppressive stillness. A sound made me freeze, not a branch snapping underfoot, not the rustle of an animal, but a deliberate step, soft, almost tentative, coming from somewhere just beyond the trees. I spun around, but the mist swallowed everything. Did anyone else hear that? I whispered, heart hammering. Jason's voice carried from ahead. It's probably just the woods. There's nothing out here. I wanted to believe him. I clung to that hope as the whispers returned, winding around my ears, brushing against my hair. This time, they weren't distant. They were insistent, circling in ways that didn't make sense. My skin prickled. I could feel them tugging at the edges of my mind, urging me to look, to move, to follow. Then I saw the figure. It stood among the trees, tall and impossibly thin, limbs bending in ways that no human could. Its head tilted slowly, eyes glinting in the faint light that filtered through the canopy. I blinked. When I looked again, it was gone, replaced by a patch of shadow that didn't quite match the shape of the surrounding trees. I gasped and stumbled backward. Jason grabbed my arm, steadying me. Hey, it's okay, he said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. His eyes darted nervously to the tree line. You're just seeing things, am I? I thought. My pulse pounded so loudly I was sure the figure could hear it. The mist seemed to close in, thickening, shifting, almost alive. Every step I took felt resisted, like the forest itself was tugging me down, slowing my progress, forcing me to confront whatever was out there. The group called to each other, Mark, Jason, the others, but their voices sounded strange, warped, echoing unnaturally through the mist. Sometimes I thought I could hear them behind me when they were clearly ahead, or to my left when they were far right. The forest was warping space itself, or perhaps warping my mind. Then Mark screamed. It was short, abrupt, filled with pure panic. I ran toward the sound, but the trail twisted unnaturally. Trees blocked the way that had been clear moments ago, and the mist thickened to the point where I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. Mark! I shouted. My voice sounded small, swallowed immediately by the dense air, and then I saw him, or what looked like him, a figure crouched in the undergrowth, bending at impossible angles, hair matted, face obscured. For a moment it was him. Then the form snapped upright, taller, thinner, limbs elongating unnaturally. He, or it, vanished into the mist. I stumbled back, heart pounding, breath shallow. The whispers were all around me now, pressing on my ears, murmuring words I couldn't fully catch, but understood instinctively. You shouldn't be here. We're watching. Don't leave. Jason grabbed my hand, eyes wide with terror. We need to get back. But the forest had changed again. The trail we had used earlier was gone, replaced by twisted roots and shadows that seemed to move when we weren't looking. Every step felt wrong. Every turn brought a new dead end, new shifting shadows, new whispers. We ran blindly, calling for the others, but the forest swallowed their voices. Panic rose like a tide, suffocating. The mist swirled around us thick and cold, and I could feel something brushing my shoulders, tugging at my hair, whispering directly into my mind. Stay, stay with us forever. I stumble, falling to my knees, the cold, damp soil pressing to my palms, the smell of wet pine filling my nostrils. I tried to stand, tried to move forward, but the forest seemed to resist, roots grabbing at my boots, shadows stretching across the path. Something moved in front of me. I froze. A figure emerged from the mist, taller than any human, impossibly thin, head cocked to one side. Its eyes glimmered, reflecting the faint moonlight that had begun to pierce through the trees. It tilted its head slowly, and I felt it examining me, judging me, waiting. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but my body refused to obey. Jason tugged me forward. "Come on!" he shouted, voice breaking. We ran blindly, dodging roots and low branches, the whispers following us, twisting around our thoughts, urging, coaxing, threatening. And I realized something terrifying. The forest wasn't just around us, it was inside us now. Every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat belonged to it. By the time we stumbled into a small clearing, panting, shivering, I understood the truth. Whatever was out there was patient, and had been waiting for us. Not just tonight, not just for us, but for anyone foolish enough to wander too deep into its pines. And as the mist swirled and the whispers curled in my ears, I knew the night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The forest had no mercy by the time we stumbled into the clearing. Mist clung to every tree and boulder, thick and cold, curling around our ankle like tendrils. My hair plastered itself to my forehead, sweat mixing with the chill of the night. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but my legs felt leaden, heavy with fear. Jason was beside me, breathing hard, face pale. "We need to get to the truck," he said, but even he sounded uncertain. The trail we had taken earlier was gone, swallowed by the dark, twisted forest. Every step we took seemed wrong, leading us deeper into the mist instead of toward escape. And then I heard it again. Whispers, louder now, pressing against my ears, curling around my skull. They weren't words, not exactly. More like voices brushing against thought, urging, coaxing, threatening. "You can't leave. Stay with us. Forever." Something shifted in the shadows. I froze. A figure emerged, taller than any human, thin and bending in ways that made my stomach turn. Its head tilted, watching, analyzing. I thought I could see a face, pale and featureless, eyes glimmering faintly in the mist. My pulse raced. The whispers turned sharper, insistent, wrapping around my thoughts. Jason grabbed my arm. "Run!" he shouted. I obeyed, and we tore through the forest blindly, branches whipping our faces, roots tangling our feet. The mist followed, curling, thickening, swallowing us. I could hear it, them moving in the trees, twisting between trunks impossibly fast, never making a sound. We stumbled over a fallen log, my hands scraping against bark and moss. I felt something brush my shoulder, cold and solid. I screamed but didn't stop running. Behind me, I thought I heard a voice calling my name, soft and coaxing. I didn't stop. The forest had become a labyrinth. Every clearing we found led only to more shadows, more whispers, more shapes moving just out of sight. Jason shouted, but his voice echoed strangely, distorted, as if the forest was swallowing it and spitting it back in pieces. Then I tripped, hard. My palms hit the damp soil and I looked up. The figure was there, no, not one, many. Thin shadows stretching, bending unnaturally, circling us. They didn't move like humans. They moved like the forest itself, twisting around trunks, slipped through mist. Observing, I scrambled backward, chest heaving. Jason grabbed my hand again, pulling me up. "We're almost there," he panted, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. We weren't almost anywhere. We were in the center of the forest now, surrounded. The whispers became words, just fragments, barely coherent. Stay, don't leave. We remember, we wait. A shadow lunge, not like a person, but like a branch animated by intent. And I felt a sharp strike across my arm. I yelped, stumbling, but Jason pulled me forward. We ran blindly, and the forest seemed to fold around us, the same trees stretching and twisting, closing off every path we try. And then, light. Through the mist, I saw it. The faint glow of headlights, the edge of a clearing, relief surge, blinding in its intensity. I bolted toward it, dragging Jason with me. Behind us, the whispers faded slightly, as if mocking, teasing us for making it this far. We burst into the clearing. The truck sat there, engine idling, the warm glow spilling across the ground. I dove inside, shaking, gasping for air. Jason followed, slamming the doors, and we sat in silence, listening. The forest loomed around us, silent now, or at least quieter. But the sense of being watched didn't leave. Shadows seemed to linger at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the headlights. I could still hear faint whispers threading through the air, teasing, coaxing, patient. Jason started the truck, engine roaring. The headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the path back to the main road. We drove in tense silence, the mist trailing behind, curling in unnatural waves between the trees. I didn't look back, but I didn't have to. Even from inside the truck, I could feel it. The forest had marked me. The whispers weren't gone. They followed, echoing faintly in my mind, reminding me some places never forget. Some places never let go. By the time we reached the edge of the forest, sunlight was breaking over the horizon. Relief should have come with it, but the unease didn't leave. I knew the forest had not claimed us fully, not yet, but had left its mark. The whispers lingered, subtle, insistent, curling at the edges of thought. We'll be waiting. Next time. I glanced at Jason. His hands were tight on the wheel, jaw clenched, eyes darting toward the tree line, even as the trees grew smaller behind us. None of us spoke. None of us could. The forest had won in its own patient, creeping way, and I knew deep down that the whispers were not finished. Somewhere in the pines, something waited, and it always would. If you survived that night, take a deep breath. But don't forget, some forests never forget. The whispers linger, and sometimes they're calling for you. If you like this story, hit subscribe, comment your thoughts, and share it with someone who's brave enough to venture into the dark. Until next time, keep your senses sharp and your lights on.